Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Tattoo Homewreckers, a podcast where we talk about tattoos, life, and everything in between. My name is Callista, and this is
Gaia.
And today we are back with another doozy. But before we get into that, let's talk about this morning.
So we're talking about this morning because I want to talk about panic poops.
Mm-hmm. Just real quick.
Yeah, real quick. Side note, panic poops. We took Guinness to the vet this morning, and the vet tech walked in and she shit on the floor, and just because she was so nervous, and she never ever poops like inside or anything.
I was shocked.
Like that.
I was because I didn't even notice it until the vet was like, "Oh," and then
I didn't either.
Picked it up, and I was like, I felt so bad.
Yeah.
Fuck.
And then right before we recorded this is actually our second time, so hopefully it'll be more polished because we had a lot of technical difficulties the first time.
Yes.
My mouth won't work now.
I know.
I had to go panic poop. And so I was thinking about how funny it is that like people, get so like scared or nervous.
Yeah.
That then their bodies are like, evacuate everything. You must poop.
Mm-hmm.
And dogs also do that apparently. So
yeah.
For all the other panic poopers out there, I see you. I love you. It's okay.
You are not alone.
Yeah, you're not alone. And speaking of not being alone, we're going to now talk about narcissism and abusive families and how that primes you for being a perfect target for a narcissist later in life. So it's a continuation of last week's episode. Mm-hmm. I sound really well put together right now. Maybe I don't. Maybe people are like, oh shit, I can tell she's nervous. She's speaking real fast.
Yeah.
But yeah, so expect tears, and we're going to be talking about emotional abuse. We're not going to talk about physical abuse, but just if that is super triggering for you, absolutely,
set this one out.
Yeah, set this one out. It's going to be painful.
Yeah. We've got a lot to talk about.
And once again, we are not medical professionals. We cannot diagnose someone as a narcissist. And fun fact, doctors already have a hard time of diagnosing someone with a narcissist.
Absolutely. Dr. Ramani says, and she quoted another doctor, and I'm so sorry to this other doctor because I don't remember your name. I'm so sorry. But this doctor said that it's hard to diagnose a narcissist because you can't really diagnose someone for being a jerk. Mm-hmm. Can't really do that. And the only time that narcissists actually get diagnosed is if they come in themselves to go get diagnosed. And it's not because they realize that being a narcissist is a problem, because that's a core value for a lot of narcissists, is that they are never the problem. Mm-hmm. But because they've noticed that stuff around their life has been falling apart. What?
I'm going to interject really fast. Yeah. That's really interesting how that's their core value is they're not the problem. However, people that are raised by narcissists or victim of narcissists always believe that they are the problem. You guys just got to watch that revelation in like real time.
Zinger!
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So that, with that being said,
you can talk about the 4 types because we realized we didn't cover that last episode. And honestly, you guys, this is so much information, and we are just 2 people who are doing our best to learn about it.
Who were emotionally abused.
Just emotionally abused nerds who want to share our stories. And just as a quick side note before she gets in there, I am sharing my story and Callista's sharing her story. And it is to not invalidate any of your stories.
Love that, yeah.
It is narcissism in family dynamics presents differently in every family. A little bit because there are those 4 different types, but also because of the fact that we are all different. So if you hear something that you're like, well, that's not how it was for me, that's A-okay. Mm-hmm. And if you are also in a place where you're like, I think that's normal, I would sit with that. Because honestly, I used to believe the same thing. And I would say to check out Dr. Romney on YouTube, and it will be in the show notes, and also Insight Podcast. Mm-hmm. Dr. Romney also has several books, and I've started listening to one of them so far, and they're amazing. Yeah. So we'll put links to resources, because that's all this is. This episode is just meant to make you, A, feel not alone, also how to recognize that those patterns in other people if you are not aware of it, and how to love people through the healing portion of this.
I love that. Very well put. Well put.
And people can't leave until they want to leave. So just, I don't know, maybe throw some like episodes at them and hope it helps wake them up.
Yeah. Or if you are suspicious that like some of the things that we are saying really hit home again, it's just really to educate people and to remind them that they are not alone, to make them aware of things that could happen. So
Yep.
with that being said, we'll just go into the 4 types of narcissists. So we've got our first kind, which is the grandiose narcissist. That is, I love that. Yeah, the gesture for grandiose narcissists. And that is the most commonly known narcissist. So it is, the classic just self-absorbed person. They always have to be the best in the room.
Center of attention.
Yeah, center of attention, very fixated on themselves, which a lot of the traits that we'll be talking about, a bunch of them kind of interlap. Think of a giant Venn diagram. So where one of the core values is that they're never the problem. Another core value that a lot of narcissists have is that they are the main character in everybody's stories, not just their own.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big one we'll touch on later. But there's a grandiose one, the most commonly known one. The malignant narcissist, which is the cousin of the psychopath and or just very closely related to...
They're a psychopath that can feel things.
Yes, exactly. And a lot of narcissists will weaponize empathy. So don't think that just because, this person isn't a narcissist because they are empathetic. No.
Or they feel bad after the fact, but they continue to do those things.
Right. They might get better for a little bit, but then continue to do those things. No, it's not a thing. But malignant narcissists, a very popular term used to describe them is that they will stop to no end, even if it means putting someone in danger or putting themselves in danger to get what they want. So that's where the term malignant comes from. Mal is bad. The covert narcissist, which I'm very familiar with. And that is the narcissist that is chronically victimized. They are always the person down on their luck, yet they still think of themselves as the best. So they'll think of themselves as no, I was an amazing singer or an amazing artist, but the world isn't kind to me and they don't understand me and they never saw my truest potential and they are just always
self-sacrificing.
Yeah. And when things happen to them, it's always, oh, woe is me,
Or when things happen
to others.
People. So if your child, say, is diagnosed with something.
Oh, my God.
And it is the end of the world to you. Not because you are oh, wow, now my child has this hurdle. How can I help them?
Right.
But you either gaslight or get angry about it because the idea that this extension of you, which is how narcissists view most people, is an extension of them, especially their children. It is just an extension of who they are, and that is not perfect, and people will not perceive it as perfect. Then they are the ultimate victim because they are the ones being harmed by this. So they don't have the ability to see that it is harmful for that individual and that people are separate from them, but that it always comes back to reflect poorly on them.
Absolutely. And you'll find that these people cannot be there for you because, your suffering makes them uncomfortable. And no, they are the ultimate victim always. Even when they do something wrong to you, they still flip it back to them being the victim and you being the problem. And it's very sneaky. That's
Hence why it's covert.
Covert.
Which, in my opinion, is probably one of the scariest ones because it's really easy to gaslight people into being no, you just want to see the bad in them. And then the more you learn about it, the more you're oh, shit.
Yes.
That's fucking bad.
So if you're a highly empathetic person, right. If you're very highly empathetic, you will attract these covert narcissists because you want to help them or you want to be there for them or...
Can I add a note in here?
Yeah.
If you are a highly empathetic person, I recently learned this, that a lot of people are oh, I'm just really empathetic. I can go into a room and feel how everyone is feeling and just predict mood changes. That is typically a sign of an unstable childhood because you had to learn to either walk on eggshells or to detect your caregiver's moods when you were a child. And we tend to, when I say that, for some people, that's not the case. They did not grow up with that. They are I don't know what the fuck that means. Fuck yes. Awesome. Congratulations. That's not to say that your life is without problems. That's just to say that you didn't have that. But typically what I've found in talking to people about this is that you'll have one or two people in mind, specifically in childhood, you'll have one person in mind. You're oh yeah, I always knew how they were feeling. And that teaches you to be heightened. So you are not empathetic. I mean, you are, but you become empathetic because you have a heightened awareness of those around you. And that stems from trauma in your childhood. And I know that the word like trauma and abuse are very triggering words. And we use them very intentionally. And it took me a very long time to talk about coming from a abusive household. And it's still something I'm not 100% comfortable like saying. But we are using these words very intentionally.
Yeah. So. Oh, absolutely. No, yeah, we're not, I mean, you know, it's the hot gossip word of the internet now, which is like, you know, trauma, abuse, triggers, stuff like that. But we are taking it, I mean, as seriously as we possibly can. Yeah. We're not trying to fearmonger. We're not trying to do this. Again, the whole point of this is just to educate you guys, tell you a little bit about ourselves and our experiences, and hopefully cast a net to, I guess, wake people up. Yeah. Or have people find help. That's the best that we can really offer, is hoping that you guys feel a little bit less alone. Yep. So our last one is a communal narcissist, which is also interesting because if you don't think that you know any grandiose narcissists, malignant narcissists, I hope not, covert narcissists, a lot of people can spot a communal narcissist in their lives. And the communal narcissist is a person who does a lot of acts of kindness, but there's something a little bit off about them. They're constantly like, oh, well, like, I do this for the community. I go and volunteer here. I donate here. I host this charity event. I do this and I do this and this and this and this. Look at how good of a person I am because of all the things that I do. Now, don't get me wrong. There are people who do these things out of the goodness of their hearts, for sure.
Well, it's also, they'll oftentimes weaponize that against you. Right. So then it's, look at all these good things I did for you.
That's the key ingredient,
right? So when you question them, I did this for you. Look at all these good things. Like I think it's Kate and Helen use the example all the time of parents who are like, well, I clothed you and I fed you and I kept a roof over your head. Yeah. Which is the basic, bare fucking minimum of having a child. You do not get credit for that. You would have a roof over your head. You would feed yourself and clothe yourself, whether or not you had a spouse or kids. So you do not get credit for this bare minimum of survival. And that those are the people that will be like, well, I did all these great things. Look at how good I am, because they weaponize that against you. So you cannot say, hey, you did X, Y, and Z.
I think that's one of the, I guess, scariest parts about all four narcissists is that they are really good at making sure that they look good. And it does make you, that in of itself makes you question your reality. Like, how can this person be bad if they do all these good things or if they do this?
It also makes everyone else question your reality.
Yes, absolutely.
Because everything they do and say is very calculated. So they will word things that when you repeat that exact statement back to others, oftentimes people, unless you are that malignant narcissist, which is like, I will stop at no end.
Loose cannon, just going for it.
The rest of them, they will say things very calculated, and that's where it comes back to last episode, where they know what they're doing. They know what works. They know what doesn't work. And that's that painful part of like, they are very careful with the way that they phrase things. So when you do present it back or when you explain it to someone else, people can then just be like, no, it's not that bad, and participate in your gaslighting. It's the same sense of like when in my sense where I had a like family that participated in that, all of society also participated in it. So when I started speaking out against my mom and like was actually trying to like advocate for my own well-being, everyone was like, well, it's your mom. You can't say that. That's your mom. Like, and when I maintained, like, I have had no contact for a long time. And I got a lot of just hate for that. And even like now, if people ask me about like my family, I'm like, yeah, well, I don't speak to like a couple members of my family. And I don't speak to anyone who tried to pressure me into that relationship. And I think one of my favorite things that they say on the Insight podcast is when people are like, well, you have to speak to them. Those are your parents. You only get one. And when they start pressuring you to ask them, like, why do you want me to be abused?
Yeah. Why do you want me to continue something that is harmful to me? And I get it because you and I especially has been struggling with dealing with this whole idea that narcissists know what they're doing, which goes against a very big value that both of us share, is that like a lot of people don't realize it. Like people are inherently good and sometimes they aren't. And that's shitty.
But it also has to make you wonder if that's because we were programmed to believe that people are inherently good.
Fuck.
Because that benefited our abusers.
Yeah, right?
So it's one of those like
Where does
chicken
that come
egg
from?
situation.
Yeah.
Are people inherently good, or was that put in us? Because that goes back to that idea that like, yeah, I was always taught that I was wrong. That like every bit of neglect, when I got the silent treatment, I deserved it. It's the same realization that I had a couple months ago in the fact that my husband, you know, freezes and he goes silent in like moments of like when we're having a problem. And it hit me one day where I was like, are we married because your form, and it's his form of like, you know, he just freezes, like fight, flight, freeze, fawn. He freezes. And to me, that is the silent treatment's one of the most painful things, because that's what I got like as a kid. Like if you did anything wrong, you know, would get punished, and it was always very verbal. And belittled and just demeaned, but you also got ignored. And when you think about that from a very like biological sense, children need love, they need affection, and they need to know that their caregivers are going to be there for them. So when you ignore a child, it tells them that you are alone and you are being isolated from the pack and you will die. And so it is a very like horrible thing to do. But then that's like that realization where I was like, oh, is this one of those that like, this is a trauma and this is a pain that feels familiar? And because in my brain, when he does that, it was like, you deserve this. This pain that happens of him shutting you out, ignoring you, where he would stonewall. Now, granted, he's way better. Like we have worked on it and the communication's phenomenal.
He's fucking crushing it.
Yeah, it's amazing. But having that realization where I was like, wow, like I got with someone who stonewalls me because that's the most harmful way. So it was a way of me self-harming.
Right.
Without realizing it. And here we are, we're like 15 years in and I'm like, oh, fuck.
Well, I mean, Dr. Ramani talks about it too. I'm just interjecting for a second.
No, do it. Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of the times, yeah, when her clients say that, like, I don't know, we just have this chemistry, a lot of chemistry is rooted in familiarity.
Yeah.
So that is familiar to you. The stonewalling is familiar. And although the stonewalling is different than actual like silent treatment, and freezing is different than actual silent treatment, they present the same.
Yeah. To me, it feels the same. Like,
absolutely.
Yeah,
they present
we talk
the same.
About this.
They feel the same. And
it's the most painful thing to me. I do not know what comfortable silence is.
Exactly.
It does not exist. Silence is pain. Silence means that you are rejecting me, that I have done something wrong, and then I will sit there and try to figure out what I have done wrong. Hence, the blamable face episode.
Right.
Is realizing like how much of that is a perception, and then me willing to be the scapegoat, me always interjecting to be like, hey, okay, fine, I'm in trouble. Like, that's it. It's me. And then people around me feeling that and being like, okay, the problem is you because I am the safest person to blame.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, we're just uncovering all sorts of goodies.
And you guys are, I mean, seeing it in real time, right?
Oh, yeah.
So that's the journey that we've been on. And a lot of the childhood shit, like you said, I mean, this is a great introduction to your childhood, right? So it has primed you for the relationship that you have or have had and have experienced, the cycles that you've done.
Yeah.
So I guess as someone who broke away from that cycle in your late 20s, now discovering this in your 30s, how has it been? I want you to tell, like, I guess the people who may have been going through the same thing. What does recovery look like on the other end?
So, just to give like a little bit of a side note, I guess I've always known something was wrong. That's why I started like keeping a journal, so that way I could, really like look back on things and say, hey, these are like my family. Like one of the main statements that was said in my family, one of the last like major discussions I had with my brother, he literally said it to me. So it's like a very like common core dialogue, and that's how you're choosing to remember it.
Awful.
So I,
Horrible.
at the age of 8, started keeping diaries and would just write, and it's just menial, like daily stuff. And I would write that stuff down because then if I ever contradicted anything my mom said, then she would say, that's not how that happened. And that's like as far back as I can remember, like I have not trusted myself to believe things accurately. It also means that now as an adult, that presents that like when I get something wrong, when I remember something wrong, you are one of the main people that has to deal with that. Like it creates a moment of like flood and panic because then I can't trust myself.
Right. It almost reaffirms like all the things
it reaffirms that belief
you.
that I cannot be trusted within my own brain, that my belief of the world is not accurate.
Right.
And then just for everyone who's like not watching but is listening, I do apologize. I'm going to be sniffly because I'm crying through this. You guys are just on a full emotional journey.
Are.
We have a tissue box here. Yeah, so then I started keeping a journal and a diary, and then and this is kind of the difference between narcissists and then like liars.
Right.
Is that when you present that evidence to somebody who is a liar, they will cop to it. They will say, "Oh yeah, my bad." And a narcissist will be like, "Well, like in the case of my family, well, that's how you're choosing to remember it."
Yeah. Which, to touch on that term just really fast, it is, and this is going to sound like weird using a good adjective for it, but an excellent way to reaffirm that self-gaslighting, to reaffirm that self-distrust, to tell you that like, oh, well, you're choosing to remember it. And I want to debunk it really fast. As someone who takes things really literally, you take things really literally. Yeah. I don't think that has anything to do with anything. Because you are I've seen you write notes before. I've seen you structure things before. It's very factual, very evident, spaced.
Yeah, well, I think that's probably rooted in that trauma of not being able to trust my brain. I mean, the discovery that like ADHD oftentimes comes from trauma in childhood is like one of those things that like helps me be more okay with that. Yeah. But I just recently really struggled with that where I was like, okay, but do I have ADHD because I was abused? Or do I have ADHD because that's just how my brain works? Right. So am I a very like factual individual and a very literal individual because that's how my brain like just works? It's that whole like, you know, whether it's nature or nurture. Right. And that's been something that I've been like working through lately, as you know.
Right. And it can be and.
Yeah. And it can be and.
Which is a beautiful thing, right?
Yeah. I can appreciate very literal things. But I have a hard time with like some nuances. So when someone's like, or like I have a hard time with sarcasm. Yeah. I have a hard time understanding it. So I have to like look at people. And we just discovered this with like facial expressions. You actually told me about this.
I did, yeah. Kids who are basically in a very abusive household emotionally, and that it's very turbulent and all of that. Your amygdala forms differently. And you're, like I said, your brain fucking is shaped differently when you are that young and you are under that amount of pressure at all times, to the point where like your literal brain will start forming differently, and a part of your brain starts reading neutral faces as hostile faces. And that's part of, unfortunately, that is part of being in an abusive household for that long at that young age.
Yeah. Which is definitely something that,
because your brain is shaped to do that now.
Yeah. That, like, well, it's that spending your whole life walking on eggshells. So you know that at any point in time, you learn to like, it's why I talk about like, I'm a really good liar. And I learned that as a child. And it's also why I very much do not want to lie to people, which is why I don't like keeping secrets. I don't like any of that because as a child, I learned that it was safer to lie than it was to tell the truth. And you learn to lie really quickly and you learn to lie believably because that is a matter of survival. It's, am I going to be punished if I don't adhere? If I don't tell you what you want me to tell you, then I'm going to get in trouble. And it's why I also have a hard time with like, we've talked about this in the past on the podcast, like I am not one to tell people like good morning, because most people, when they say good morning, it's a very flippant thing. And I have a really hard time with like flippant comments about like, good morning. Like, you don't fucking care. Stop. You don't care that I'm having a good morning. Don't ask me how I am if you don't care, because disingenuine emotions for me are viscerally painful. So I would rather just come in and like do a slight head nod. And then it's only when I can feel safety with someone that I'm like, okay, now I can like show you who I actually am, which at this stage in my life, that healing looks like keeping my group very small.
Yeah.
That you have to assume that when I say things, because I am abrupt, I am abrasive, I am very direct and blunt, that you assume that it's from a good place. So I need people that are not assuming that I'm coming from a bad place, because I'm assuming that most people are mad at me. You know, when we were in Florida and you guys were tired at the end of the day, and excuse me, and Nicole looked just grumpy because she was tired, and I was texting Caboose like, I don't think they like me, like I think she's mad at me, like she doesn't want to be here anymore. And it's like, it's taken a really long time, like for you, when you get tired, for me to not be like, oh, she hates me,
right?
Because that's the narrative that I've been told. That's also the narrative that I've been told, like literally from my family, that people do not like me,
right?
That like people are just tolerating me. So I need a lot more of that like reassurance. And that's what like, to me, where that like next stage of healing is.
Yeah.
Where it's understanding that like, there are parts of me I can't change. I cannot change the like lack of being on time. I fucking can't. So now I'm going to make sure that like our front desk tells people like, your artist is probably going to run a couple minutes late, so people don't get offended. And they're not like, she doesn't care. And I'm really quick with my clients that when like, I'm sorry, I'm chronically 3 to 11 minutes late.
I love that.
And it is literally like, I will be 3 to 11. I will not be over 11 minutes late for you, but like you will be at the front desk. Like you will be waiting, and your appointment's at 10:33 to talk to me. And I walk in the door at 10:33 and your appointment's at 10:30, and I feel bad. But just being honest with my clients and being like, no, that's it. Like,
yeah, this is
how me. It is. And this is, if you want to get tattooed by me, this is it. And like having friends where I can like turn to you and be like, are you okay? Like we have our beep boop boops that we do.
So I'll do a call. I'll go beep beep boop just to make sure that like she's good.
Yeah, and then I'll beep boop boop back to her.
Yeah, or she'll do, or you'll call first because that means you're checking in on me, making sure that I'm good, and then I'll just beep back.
And like then like I have it with like Caboose. I'll do like a thumbs up. And I have like different little signs that aren't super like invasive to people in my life where I have to be like, are we okay? Because that's a very vulnerable question. And also like, I just don't want to say that. So we have our own little terms of like, are we okay? Because I need a lot of reassurance. And that's kind of where like, for me, it's been dismantling that armor of like, if you knew me in my early 20s, I was very flippant and I was crass and I was just rough because that's the only way I knew how to be. And it took, having an outsider. Like I was very fortunate that I had a therapist that I was just tattooing that saw the interaction one day, and I was tattooing her. And my mom came in to the tattoo shop that we had together. And she talked to me for just a couple minutes and then she left. And that lady said, hey, like, that's not okay. And I was like, what the fuck is she talking about? And she's like, the way that she just spoke to you is not okay. And I thought it was the weirdest way to get advertisement for your business because you were a therapist. I genuinely was like, well, this is...
Damn, I mean, it's effective, but like, shit, bro. Like, you didn't have to do that.
I was like, this is weird.
That's really funny.
Yeah, I was like, that's an interesting tact for, like, way to, like, get people.
Yeah.
And so shout out to Jen, because you're fucking phenomenal. And if you ever hear this, also, you literally saved my life.
The fucking bravery on you. The balls on you, dude. Amazing. Fucking phenomenal.
And it was, then she just gave me a book, which was perfect because it was a perfect way to let me get there when I was ready. Because I think I was like 26 or 27 at the time. And, you know, like our lives were completely enmeshed. My mom and I owned a business together. kind of. That's a whole other story. There's a lot of
Basically.
like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
But we ran a tattoo shop together. And it was enough for coming from a complete outsider because like my brother's wife had pointed that out, that like this whole thing is fucked. And all of us were raised in it. And it's where like my obsession with learning about cults has really like stemmed from. And now I can see that where narcissists and cults are very enmeshed because the head of a cult is typically a narcissist.
Yeah.
And how everyone assumes it'll never happen to them. And that in and of itself is a communal gaslighting of every single victim of a cult. Everyone is like, that would never happen to me. I'm so much smarter than that. It's the same thing that happens in abusive relationships.
Grinds my gears.
So quick to say that would never happen to me. And in our case, it's why we wanted to also talk about how like your family dynamic shapes you to be a prime victim of this. Because I was raised believing that I was the problem and that I deserved to be treated the way that I was treated. And if she was angry, I made her angry, and that was my fault. And then I also learned to like, participate in my brother's abuse. That like, if you wanted to shift from being the invisible child or the scapegoat, and you wanted to be the golden child, then you better get on the shit talking bandwagon. And like, we just addressed this like last year where my boss was like, yo, you shit talk with people because you think that that's a bid for connection, and it's not. And I like sat with that because it was a painful thing where I'm like, I'm in my mid 30s and like, I very much believe in productive piss and moaning and venting. But I can see how for some people that it's a really fine line between venting and shit talking. And that was something that like was a very bonding thing in like my relationship with my mother, was that everyone was beneath us. And then as I grew up, I had really horrible feelings around it. Where I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to talk shit about people. I don't believe these things, but you learn to just be compliant and say it.
Because that's part of survival. And unfortunately, like Dr. Ramani talks about it too, like when you're involved with a narcissist, no one is left unscathed.
No.
Unfortunately, because like I said, like the key, although there's 4 different types, one of the things included in the whole Venn diagram in the center of all of those different types is the fact that they want to be the main character in everyone's story, and it doesn't matter how they get there. And so they will find a way to make sure that you feel like, in order, especially if it's your own mom or if it's anybody, any close member in your family or a friend or whatever, you are dependent on surviving with them, because if you get on their bad side, good luck.
Well, yeah, that's the thing.
It's pain.
Not only did they they harm you, and there was a I don't remember what movie it was, but there was a line that I heard when I was like 21, 22 that really just spoke to me, and that was like, she knows how to push your buttons because she programmed them there. She put them there. And that's the thing when it comes to like narcissistic parents and even just narcissistic like members of your family, because like my brothers would do the same thing. They know the buttons to hit, and it's the same thing with like your previous situationship. Your buttons are very obvious.
Oh, well, and they'll find it out too.
When that's what they're trained to look for. So it's the same way that like I can look at you and know that like guilt language is very, very painful for you.
Absolutely, it is.
But for them, they read that as, this is a very effective tool.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, this is how I get in with her. Absolutely. So if we are talking about family in this episode, but I will touch a little bit on that. If you do meet a narcissist, and God help you if you do date a narcissist, like Dr. Ramani has a video on that, just signs that you're dating a narcissist. One of the biggest signs is they will ask you very intrusive questions. And at first it seems really charming because it's like, oh my God, they really want to get to know me on a deeper level. But in all reality, and I still struggle with believing this, it is to understand where the fuck your buttons are.
Well, I think we struggle with that because we are very curious people.
Yes.
So then, like, when I learned that, I literally asked my friend about a divorce. And, like, we're new in this friendship. And I was like, what happened there? Yeah. And then I was like, oh, no. Like, is this person going to think that I'm asking this because I'm trying to, like, gain knowledge to harm them? Mm-hmm. Whereas for me, it's that, like, curiosity. So we always make that assumption that, like, you're asking me this because you want to know, because I ask very intrusive questions. Mm-hmm. Always with the caveat of you don't have to answer it because I don't want people to feel forced into answering.
That's the difference is every narcissist's worst word in their dictionary is the word no.
And I love it. That's my favorite word when people tell me.
And that is also a key factor of, like, if you don't want to share this information, they will make it known to you that they are displeased with the fact that you weren't compliant. Yeah. Which goes back to that family root of when you are raised in a family that has a narcissist in it or more or whatever. Your worth is based off of A, how compliant you are, how easygoing you are, and B, how good you're making the narcissist feel.
And look to the rest of the world.
Yeah, which goes into your performance. If you're performing well, it makes them look good. Yeah. But in all reality, all three of those things, it still can flip a switch. You could still do anything. You could hang out with someone that makes you happy, and that will trigger a narcissist. That will make them fucking pissed.
One of the things that I felt so, like, illuminating was learning about, and it's interesting because once again it comes back to that, like, cult thing, is the isolation that happens where every relationship I had was poisoned. So, like, friends were poisoned, and it got to a point where in my 20s I knew this. So I had a friend and I was like, please, like, don't spend time with her, like, by yourself, because she will poison this. Like, she had poisoned relationships that's, like, I'd had, like, actual relationships and, like, dating relationships with, like, every one of our, like, my siblings. And we would, like, know it because like they would say it. They'd be like, well, she said blah, blah, blah. And so I had specifically told this friend, like, hey, don't do that. Like, I'm begging you, like, don't put yourself in that situation because she will drop poison in this. And then sure enough, she went, had coffee, gave her a massage. And then that friendship eroded because then she was like, well, you don't actually like me. You're just using me. And this friend became like all the things that, like, that's the thing with a narcissist is that they will tell you that you are all the things that they are. And then part of that, like, healing after the fact is dismantling that, where I'm like, oh shit, that's not like where, I believed that I was cruel. And that's why, like, if for anyone who's listening to this, that being called kind is still a really hard thing for me because that's something that, like, my whole life, that's not something I was told. And so it's really hard to, like, dismantle that. Yeah. And then you see, like, no, I'm not cruel, but I grew up with these stories of, like, harming of animals being funny and harming of siblings being funny. I did not harm animals or my siblings. Yeah. But, like, stories of their life that now I look back and I'm like, that's fucking psychotic. Like, I was accused of having an affair with my own stepdad. And that's that thing that narcissists do that is so... And just to be clear, I did not have an affair with my stepdad. He has never looked at me that way. He would never look at me that way. But it was a way to isolate that because they were no longer part of that relationship as we grew up, and I would hang out with him separately. And because they were not the center of that accusation happened. But where I talk about narcissists knowing what they're doing, which that is something that we are both very much struggling with because it goes against that core belief that everyone is good and everyone can change and grow, is that they are so calculated in the way that they say things that you cannot question it. Because then when you do, they make you look like the bad guy. And that's that part that, like, takes a lot of healing. And oftentimes it takes people outside of, like, that dynamic to, like, show light. Like, we just got a package in the mail and it's from, I think I was like 12, and Callie will just read, like, the first part. It was an assignment in school. And I thought it was funny And I'm still going to laugh through it because apparently that's how we're processing that pain. Where it's like, you had to like write who you are and like a little bit about yourself. So she'll just read like the very first line, which was just supposed to be a description of you.
Right.
And keep in mind that I was 12 when I wrote this. So I'm still very much a child.
Yeah. There's like, I wish I could show you guys. There's like apples and stuff drawn on the cover. It's very like... It is very...
If you saw it on YouTube, then you can see it.
Yeah, it's like laminated. Anyways, so yeah, the descriptors that she wrote for herself. And mind you, she handed this to me and she was laughing. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So here are the descriptors that she wrote. The first one is bossy, blonde, very impatient, and the last one is mean-tempered, which broke my fucking heart.
Yeah. And like Caboose was the same as her. Like they read that and they're like, ow,
this is terrible.
This is terrible.
And I'm like, how did you, like, as a child, turn this in? And the teacher got it back and, like, I mean, mind you, we don't have the language that we do now, and teachers are exhausted, and I get we shouldn't pin it all on them, but this is a clear sign of emotional abuse, right?
Yeah.
The other one that was really bad in this line was, who gives laughter, fear, and friendship to everyone around me. Fear?
Yeah. Because I'm scary. I'm bad.
No, it's fucked up. And then who fears to die alone and lose everyone I love? Well, that's still consistent to today. But
but that also goes back to that, like, now I can see where, like, that fear of losing everyone you love and dying alone is because that was a constant threat. That, like, you were
going to be isolated.
You're going to be isolated.
And completely alone. And
it's like...
descriptors that you have... Okay, there are 4 descriptors, right? Only one of them is neutral. And it's just a descriptor. It's not even a good thing. Yeah. It's just you're blonde.
Well, so that's because that was... Me being blonde was really important.
To her?
Yes.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. It's an interesting dichotomy because there was a hatred... of having white children, which then turned into a flippant joke where I would be like, well, you shouldn't have had sex with white men and you wouldn't have had white children. But then, then at the same time, like me keeping my blonde hair was really important. So that, but the story that I was then told later was that I cared, I cried about not being blonde, but that's because in my family, me being blonde and all the rest of my family has dark hair was special. So then I was losing the thing that made me special. Like I wasn't taught that I, as a person on the inside, was special. I was taught that I had to look special to be special. Fun. And so like having blonde hair when you're the only one in your family is a big deal when that's like the thing that is that double-edged sword where it would be like, oh, look at my daughter's beautiful, she's white, blonde hair, blue eyes. And then also that was weaponized against me. And that's that thing when you're dealing with like a narcissistic family is that the things that on one side of you are good are also weaponized against you. And I definitely thought that I was impatient and mean-tempered and that I was once again, and that's, remember writing mean-tempered because I didn't know how to spell the word cruel.
Oh my God.
Otherwise that would have been the word.
Yeah.
Because that was it. Like that's the lesson that you're taught is that like you're the problem.
And that's fucking psychotic. You were 12 when you wrote this? And can you imagine telling a 12-year-old that they are mean, that they're cruel?
Yeah.
That they're
and you're bossy. How the fuck are you?
Let's break that one down. That as a feminist, we're done with this word. The word bossy, if you meet a bossy little girl, you're meeting a boss-ass bitch is who you're meeting. You're not meeting someone who's bossy because a little boy is not bossy. He's assertive. He's a leader.
But that also comes back to that compliance.
Absolutely.
Is that compliance and control is that you, and that, was when I was 12 because that's when I was starting to push back more,
starting to get it, right?
Autonomy.
Yes,
that's that very fact
to be a person.
Another like example. I have 2 examples now. The one where I found that journal entry where I maybe was, I think it was 10 when I wrote it, and I read it to you a while ago, and it talked about how it's really painful. I like have memorized it. It's I think something's wrong in my house because I'm afraid of the footsteps that come down the hall. And I don't think you should be afraid of her footsteps.
Yeah.
And like when I read that, I think because I would periodically go back through and like read my journals, but it's like that where I'd kind of like deflect and make them funny. And then when I read that, like just I think like last year, and I fucking cried because I felt so bad that it took me so long to get like little baby Gaia out of that situation. And don't get me wrong, I'm super grateful that I was able to, and that's why I'm always thankful for that therapist for like shining the light on that. So I was able to, because there are so many people that never get the opportunity to leave. And like Dr. Romney talks about it, and they talk about it on Insight Podcast a lot too, where like not everyone can leave.
Absolutely. And there's support for you too.
Yeah.
Like there is so many resources for you to make sure that no one is alone in this situation. And it's super painful to like see and watch, but I'm very grateful that you're sharing this on the podcast. I get in this very grateful place.
Well, and I mean, I'll give you guys a funnier example, and that was when I was 12, when I got my period for the first time. And I used to tell this as a fun anecdote. A lot of these I used to tell as like funny anecdotes, and now they're kind of like because that's another sign of like when you tell stories to people. And she's laughing because we talk about this a lot. When you tell stories to people and they are like, "What the fuck?" That's a red flag.
It's not.
But once again, just like with a cult, we can watch these documentaries and be like, what the fuck? But this doesn't happen overnight. In my case, I was raised in it. My whole family is raised in it. It's a systemic thing. I can see how like that triangulation happened with my grandmother, with her children, with her grandchildren, because it happened between my cousins and I. Oftentimes in those family dynamics, you can see that like as children grow up, they're not actually very close because they've spent their entire life in competition for the scraps of love that you can get. And oftentimes the only way you can get that love is through infighting, is through stepping on each other to get what little bit of love and approval you can gain from that person. But like this one, which it still makes me laugh, but it obviously shows you where there is a lack of autonomy on like the sense of your child. And that was, I got my period and I was like, I didn't know how to use a tampon because like, why would I? I was a kid. And she offered to help me use said tampon. And I was like, no, that's gross. I don't want you to help me. Like, can you just explain it? Because sidebar, I have a hard time reading. I have not been diagnosed dyslexic, but based on everything I know about being dyslexic, I am sure as fuck dyslexic. I can't even say the fucking word. Dyslexic. There you go. So reading things does not help me maintain knowledge because I get very distracted by like the shapes of letters and then it just fucking goes away. So like reading instructions, I'm not learning that way. Don't even fucking try with me. And now I'm lucky enough to have people in my life that like help me. So like my family was very shaming and made a lot of fun of like, if you couldn't read a word, which is a big problem for me, is like I look at words and I can't sound them out. And that was a huge place of shame for me for a very long time. And now because I am in like a household where I can just turn to Callie, which this happens several times a week, where you'll turn and be like, how do I say this? Or like she'll hear me say it into my phone, so my phone will read it. And I'm like, well, that doesn't look like how that sounds. So like now there's no shame in that. But I couldn't, like the directions on a tampon box were just not making any sense. Also because it's all like the side diagram.
It's convoluted is what it is.
And I'm like, I don't know what's happening. And so I was like, can you just explain to me how it works? And she's like, well, let me show you. And I was like, I don't want to watch you do that. That's gross. And I don't want you to like me, like you're going to put it in me. And she got so angry that I would not let her put a tampon in me because back to that narcissistic belief that I am an extension of her.
Yeah.
So it is her body, like the way that their brains work is that it's their body rejecting them. Their body, it's like if your right hand just started to do fucked up shit, you'd be like, what the fuck is happening? So it was met with so much like anger.
Yeah.
And I would make a joke about it where I'm like, yeah, you know, she got pissed off because I wouldn't let her put a tampon in me. And anytime I tell that story, people are like, what the fuck?
People would, yeah, it's the classic, like, haha, you know, when you tell a story about your childhood and you expect everyone to laugh and everyone's looking at you like, are you okay?
Yeah.
That's not good. That is not fucking normal.
Yep.
Not fucking normal at all. And so we're having a lot of those lately.
Yeah, it's a lot of those, especially like the more we learn and the more she's been watching a lot of Dr. Romney stuff, which I've been watching a lot of that as well.
Yeah.
But that's a lot, very much like relationship based. And I have been on a mad, like
familial,
hyperfixation.
Like,
for Insight podcast, where they talk about that familial stuff.
Absolutely.
And they've been highlighting lots of things that I thought were totally normal belief structures, like the thought that I wished that I was adopted.
Can we talk about that really fast? I know we are very over time right now, but this is really important just because I do want all of our viewers and listeners to hear about these reoccurring thoughts that a lot of their clients seem to have. And that is a reoccurring thought. If you've ever, as a kid, have thought like, oh, I am from, like, I'm actually secretly adopted and this isn't my real family. Unfortunately,
that's oftentimes a sign of an abusive household. And it's because your child brain cannot process that your blood, or like your caregivers are wrong or bad or doing bad things to you. So you make up this belief system, which this used to be a fun fucking anecdote. And it would be how, like, when I was little, I would listen to Prince on the radio, and I thought that I was Prince's and Madonna's love child. You can just sit in that for a second. I don't know what the fuck that says about me, that those were my parents.
Fucking dope.
But that somehow they, like, Madonna had come to England and given birth in secret and had just like left the hospital, and my mom had ended up with me. And that was also the explanation of why I didn't like look like my mom, was that I was swapped in the hospital. And that these were indeed, like, my real parents were out there and they would love me. And like one day Madonna would meet me and be like, I love you so much. And Prince would be like, I'm so proud of you. And then when I heard that, when the therapist was like, yeah, I actually, because she reads letters on their podcast, and the person had said, like, they used to think they were adopted. And she was like, that's actually a really common thought among people when they're children, is that that's a way to rationalize that somewhere out there, somebody loves you.
Stupid painful.
Yeah.
Stupid
but shout
painful.
out to Prince and Madonna, my real parents.
My real parents.
So on that note, what's your favorite Prince song?
Oh my God, shut up.
We'll just end with a really quick, what is your win for the week?
Yeah, my win for the week, fuck, what is my win for the week? We just recorded a podcast yesterday, so that's why I'm like, oh fuck, I think I've already used
What's
my
your win for the day?
My win for the day is letting myself be in the moment and have fun and not be on a timeline. Because several times today while we were hanging out, I was like, oh shit, I still have to do this, I still have to do that, I still have to, and like every single time I successfully shut that out.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, which was great. I was like, dude, chill, we're good. It's a Monday. We're hanging out. We'll get this done. And just enjoy your lunch with Gaia and enjoy your time at Ulta, because I love going to Ulta. I really do.
I know. I do too.
Now you do. Yeah.
Yeah, now I do. It's not scary anymore. You like taught me that it can be a not scary place.
Absolutely. So that's my win, is finally successfully shutting off the like ticker, I guess, and just being like, hush, it's fine. We'll get to it when we get to it. What about you? What's your win?
My win is doing this, because I have been learning, I mean, I've like been learning about narcissism for a very long time, but have been really lucky lately to be able to like go further into that and to be able to go further into that with you.
Yeah. All it took was me sleeping with one.
And to be able to overcome my fear of retaliation, to be able to do this. Because even though I'm sure after this I will have a very, very
real,
big vulnerability hangover, this is my win, is to be able to come out and like say it and hope that like it at the very least make someone laugh.
Or feel a little bit seen.
Yeah, that they are not alone.
Yes, absolutely.
And for anyone who knew me in my early 20s, that I was like awful to know that like I'm sorry and that we were all in a bad place.
Survival mode.
Yeah.
Honestly, well put. And we didn't even get to the whole flying monkeys thing, but
no, we will talk about that on our next episode, because we do have some more, because I have some really interesting stuff about passive aggression, and then we'll talk about like a lot more of like self-blaming and flying monkeys and like some of the tools that get used against you.
Yeah, some of the things that made her panic poop this morning.
Yeah, the things that made me panic poop.
Yeah, because I'm not going to lie, I'm suffering from a vulnerability hangover for sure today, but you know what? Yeah. Like I said in last week's episode, everything that happens to you, you fucking own. That's your story now. And
I think that's that hard part, but you made it. So, as always, thank you so much. If you have any stories, they're apparently stories now, short stories or long stories, to like tell us. If you have anything, please send it in.
Yeah, tell us.
And if you have cruel shit to say, fuck off with you.
Yeah. Keep it to yourself.
Yeah. Everything will be like censored through Caboose, so that way we can protect ourselves for anyone that has nasty shit to respond to this.
Yeah.
So just know that it won't get to us. So, yeah.
Goodbye.
Bye.